part that the AP test really, really likes. Like I said, mitosis and meiosis, they're fine. But again, they are straight up textbook info. You can find it on the internet in 5 seconds flat. What they want to know is the more niche, less note cardable information, if you will. And that's going to be about genetic diversity. So if we're just passing on these chromatids, these little sticks, if you will, I mean, you should still expect for most offspring to be very similar, right? Because then there's only 4 options. So if you have 8 kids, they should only have 4 different phenotypes, 4 different ways they look, right? Wrong. We have genetic diversity. Da, 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 da. Cue the rainbow meme with SpongeBob here. The reason for that is because there's a couple of different processes that happen. One of them is crossing over. So you can see that up here in the top. Ooh, I got my laser pointer. You can see that here. So you've got 2 chromosomes, homologous chromosomes, and they come next to each other and they kind of do a side hug. You can see right here where they're side hugging and they're crossing over. And sometimes they go to high five and they high five a little too hard. And look, they switch. That's going to lead to genetic diversity because now you may give one homologous chromosome to a gamete. Woohoo! But it's going to take some from that red chromosome. So it's not a pure chromosome that is just from that one parent anymore. Then you come over here to the right, you can see in metaphase 1, if you look at these, they line up differently. We call this the law of independent assortment. So in the top example, you can see we've got blue, red, blue, red. Okay. In the bottom example, you can see we got blue, red, red, blue. And so when they split, you end up with different genetic arrangements. So up here, we've got blue and blue, blue and blue, and then red and red and red and red. But down here, we got blue, red, blue, red, red, blue, red, blue. So different chromosomes are going to give you different genetic features. And my favorite way to explain this is by talking about myself. These are my wedding pictures. I spent lots of money on them, so I have to share them every chance I get. So I always like to start this section with a little trick question. So if you look at these photos, here's me. I was a lot less blonde then. Okay, but if you look at these photos, you can see there's 2 guys here on the top photograph. There's these other 2 guys here on the bottom photograph. One of those photos is me and my husband and my new brother-in-law. And one of those photos is me and my 2 brothers. If you were to look at those photographs, which one would you think is my brother's? You can put it in the chat. Which one? Okay, I see DW. Yellow, Zow. Ooh, dang, y'all's consistent. Haha! The top 2 boys in the photos are my brothers. Plot twist, yellows. Good job. So my brothers are the kids in the 2 top photos. The ones in the bottom, this guy here on the left, that's my husband. He's adorable, isn't he? And this is my brother-in-law, Matt. So I don't know what kind of complex I have, but anyway. But so then you look at my whole family photo. Okay, this is my dad. This is my mom. These are my 2 brothers. This is me before I knew how to do eyebrows or hair, basically. Okay, it's like a 5 or 10-year-old photo. So there's clearly a lot of genetic variation in my family tree, okay? If you look at me and my brothers, we have a lot of variation. For some reason, phenotypically, I have less variation with my husband. Like I said, there's probably a complex there, but whatever. So, but a lot of people ask whenever they see that, and I used to get a lot of comments about this when I was younger. They were like, well, why does your family look so different? Especially because my mom and my dad both have dominant traits, you know, darker hair, And you would think that dominant trait is what gets passed on, right? But here I am blonde. I'm not quite this blonde, but I am blonde. The only one, my dad has blue eyes and I have blue eyes. And so if you look, this is a photo of my dad when he was like 20. This is a photo of me when I was 20. You can tell because I'm happy and carefree and still in college. So if you look at that photo, you can tell a little bit more. But even then, a lot of people ask, my mom is Hispanic, and they say, well, if your mom's Hispanic, she has the dominant genes. You guys know about dominant genes, right? Typically going to be associated with darker pigmentation, things like that. They're like, so why didn't you get that? And I'm like, well, because we have genetic variation, and that's caused by meiosis. And so now I'd like to take you on a little bitty trip to demonstrate how that works. So I'm going to stop sharing this thing for a moment. And I'm going to instead share with you a different screen. So this is what I was talking about when I said I had to set up my computer and things. I kind of manipulated. I am on Zoom for this. So if it looks a little funny, please let me know because I need to fix it. But I'm on Zoom because I Zoom into my computer so that I can use my iPad so I can draw things out for you. All right? The people weren't expecting a biology lecture, huh? So, here's what we've got. We're going to say this is my dad. His name is Paul. This red one is my mom. Her name's Julie. Okay? So, my mom, phenotypically, she has dark hair. My dad also has dark hair, but he had light hair when he was younger. My mom has brown eyes. My dad has blue eyes. And then you get me. Promise that there'll never be another like me. That's my Taylor Swift impersonation. You're welcome. And I have blue eyes. Okay. You are taught every time you do a Punnett square, brown eyes beats blue eyes. Ah! Kinda. Not really. Here's why. So my mom is Hispanic, but she's also Irish. She just doesn't look Irish because being Hispanic is a dominant trait. My dad is a standard German something white man. And so both of his parents, who kindly gave their DNA, they were both just normal European white people. And so when they gave their DNA, here's his chromosomes coming from his parents. My mom, she got a chromosome from her Hispanic mother, and she got a chromosome from her Hispanic father, or from her Irish father, okay? Obviously, in that case, the Hispanic chromosome was more dominant in terms of her hair color, her eye color. So then when you get to me, remember, you can only give 50% of your DNA. So if we're looking at, say, eye color, we do our handy dandy little Punnett square. We've got my dad. We've got my mom. Okay. Now remember, that red one is what's associated with the dominant feature, the brown eyes that we're talking about here. So if you go and fill this out, there's actually only a 25% chance with my parents of having that, oh, whoops, not 25%. Haha. There's actually only a 50% chance of having that eye color, having brown eyes. So this is all going to be because of meiosis, because in meiosis, my parents have in their cells their traits, their genes. But remember, you can only give 50% of them. So whenever they went through meiosis, All my dad could give was the for blue eyes because he has blue eyes. It is a recessive trait. Okay. Now, all my mom has is both. My mom is clearly heterozygous. Shouldn't that be XY? Oh, guys, I'm sorry. I just did X as I'm just now looking at the chat. I just did X as my general letter here. This is not meant to be sex chromosomes. So why do brown people not necessarily have as much variation as white people in terms of physical features? A lot of the times that can be due to your geographic regions. And so if you think about it, where someone lives and who they interact with, especially culture, plays a big part in this with biology. If you're only interacting with other people who have the same features, similar features, those are the ones that are going to be perpetuated. You're going to have homozygous genotypes for all those different people. Now, in the United States, we've got pretty high genetic diversity right now, at least in terms of like eye and hair color. But that being said, eye and hair color is not the be all end all. It's just the one we talk about it because it's the one that's right in our face first thing when we see. But if you think about individuals who maybe they do look a little more homogeneous, like different ethnicities where everyone has the same hair color, everyone has the same eye color with very little variation. They may have variation in other areas that we don't see, whether that's muscle tone, height, whatever it is. It just depends. Different groups are going to have different things. But I do want to highlight that diversity, especially genetically, is one of the greatest strengths that you can have. If you don't have biological diversity, there's a lot of problems, and we're going to talk about that in just a moment. So this is kind of just a diagram of what I was showing you guys about how those genes are passed on. And this goes through those Punnett squares that were originally shown by Gregor Mendel. So I'm hurrying here a little bit because it's already 7:30 CST. And I'm assuming y'all are pretty familiar, but feel free to put in the chat if you'd like to see another demonstration. But Gregor Mendel, as we know, he was the Austrian monk who had a gardening habit and was like, hey, these pea plants make this, but when I use these pea plants, they make these. And he was very interested in that. And I'm very glad he was, because he paved the way for one of the most interesting subjects. But he's the one who created these Punnett squares, where, like you saw with my parents, you could take just using whatever symbol. It doesn't even have to be a letter. It can just be a straight up symbol that would demonstrate dominant and recessive traits and the probability of having certain offspring. So like with me and my family, we actually followed it pretty much to the book, because my parents' Punnett squares for eye color per se showed that there was a 50% chance of them having a kid with blue eyes and a 50% chance of them having a kid with brown eyes. They only had 3. They didn't have 4, but one of us has blue eyes, 2 have brown eyes. So they came pretty close to fitting the Punnett square. Now, Mendelian genetics, Punnett squares, that's usually where they'll teach you about like, oh, does your earlobe connect or is it disconnected? They'll ask about your widow's peak, if you can curl your tongue. Those are all Mendelian traits that they like to ask about. Those are the ones that are typically going to be this or that. They are considered binary in that they have one option or another option. There's no in between. Non-Mendelian genetics is different. We don't have that complete dominance in every single aspect, because otherwise you could just be short and tall. As we all know, there is not simply short and tall. There's 5'7", 5'4", 4'9", whatever. We go on a scale. We don't have just these categories. So non-Mendelian genetics acknowledges those different types of genetics, particularly through something called incomplete dominance. And this is where traits are going to blend. So for example, if you've got an allele for white pigment and an allele for red pigment in flowers, they mix together and you get pink. Codominance is what's going to occur when both traits are equally expressed. So for example, I've got a white chicken and it breeds with a black rooster and it makes a salt and pepper chick. So you can see that over here. Those are going to be much more common. And so I used the example of eye color, again, because it's a simple demonstration. And in my family, it does work. But I will warn you, eye color typically is a non-Mendelian trait. Most of the traits like hair color, skin color, eye color, they don't necessarily apply to Mendelian genetics because you can have light brown eyes and dark brown eyes, and you can have green eyes, and you can have greenish bluish eyes. And all of those are going to have to do with how those genes are mixing. And we're going to learn a lot more about that next unit in gene expression. So please know the example I gave, it was simplified, but it does demonstrate the point for you. So we can see here some examples of that complete dominance and codominance. So we've got our genotype here. So reminder, sometimes you will see genotype like this. Sometimes we just see big B, big B. So like color is blue. So in this case, they've got the C for color with the annotation B for blue. So down here would be like color C is Y, yellow. They do it differently. So if we look at the complete dominance column, if you've got a homozygous dominant CB, that's just blue. If we go to the heterozygous down here on the bottom, CY for complete dominance, it's still blue because the blue is overruling the yellow. We only get yellow in complete dominance when we've got two Ys. Kind of like how in the example about my parents, you only got blue eyes if you just had no blue. Polygenic inheritance, yes, Jed, thank you very much. Codominance is this next one. So codominance is when you're actually going to see both of them expressed equally. So you can either have the dominant or you can have the recessive, the blue or the yellow. Or you could have both of them together in the heterozygous. And so that's when you'll often see things like spots, stripes, cool stuff like that. Incomplete dominance is where they just mix together. So again, you've got the dominant, you've got the recessive, but then in the heterozygous, you put the blue and the yellow together, you get green. So you can see this again in a Punnett square. So in this case, if you take a red color and a blue color, if you do codominance, you're going to end up with all purple. If you do that with incomplete dominance, you're going to get half blue, half red. Those are questions they love to ask on the AP exam because, frankly, most kids walk in and can do a Punnett square. That's not particularly rigorous.